Great day. I'm excited to be here with you.
Good. Well, thanks for taking time. All right. And then Brendan, are you going to intro me or am I just going to kick it off?
Sure. So my name is Brendan. You've probably got the information from me. If you're joining us, welcome. I work with Commissioner Davis at the MWRD. So welcome to our Flood Justice and Future Preparedness webinar. So I'll hand it off to Cam.
Sounds good. Thanks, Brendan. I really want to thank, first of all, my team. You just heard from Brendan. We have Don Walker, my chief of staff on, Matt Estensaro as well. I know I can't do it alone. We have thought a great deal about the flooding issues that just besieged our region last year. And that wasn't the first time we had started to think about this. We have been thinking about it and acting on it for quite some time. So we thought it was time to broaden the conversation, bring in some discussion with some of the region's top leaders here. I also do want to mention that I'm the chair of the Stormwater Management Committee at the Board of Commissioners of the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. So I barely sleep because I think about flooding and how it impacts us all the time. Yumika Brown, a fellow commissioner, is the vice chair of our committee. And I know she couldn't make it today, but she works very closely with me and my team and her team as well to be thinking far down the road, thinking ahead in terms of how we can make our region much more resilient. So with that, I also want to introduce our panelists today. And I know we get on Zooms all the time and talk about how lucky we are, but in this case, we really are lucky to have some great thinkers and advocates when it comes to not just theoretical thinking, but really pragmatic thinking and acting on how we try to keep achieving flood justice in our region. We have Ryan Wilson on the line. He's with the Metropolitan Planning Council, MPC. He does work day in and day out on stormwater throughout the region. He's a registered landscape architect, so I know Ryan thinks about stormwater, not just in terms of pumps, plants, and pipes, but in terms of how our landscape can be considered infrastructure for stormwater management, including work with StormStore and the Nature Conservancy. We also have Yiran Zhang on the line with us. She is a strategic researcher with the Service Employees International Union, or SEIU, as more of you probably know it, Local 1, representing janitors, security officers, and other workers. And she's responsible. I can't imagine a more difficult job or a more expansive portfolio. She's in charge of campaign research and strategy, organizing campaigns, policy, and leads SEIU Local 1's Environmental Justice Committee. And then we have Bryan Nelson, who's a construction analyst with Elevate. He's worked in the stormwater arena for years and years with experience in construction and flood analysis, helping property owners and communities reduce their risk of flooding. So as I'm sure you can appreciate, we've got some incredible activists, advocates, and minds when it comes to not just how to prevent flooding, but also thinking about the societal aspects of flooding and the damage it does to our families when it occurs, and it occurs in disproportionately impacted communities. So with that, why don't we go ahead and get started? Our point here is to really have a discussion, but in order to have a discussion, I'm going to ask our panelists some questions to kick things off. If you have questions yourself, please feel free to plug them into the chat. The first question I've got for you We'll start with Yiran and then go to Ryan and then Bryan is, does your organization have a definition or a statement about environmental justice? And how do you see flooding fitting into that, if at all?
Thank you for that question, and also thank you for having me on this panel. Really appreciate the opportunity. So yeah, I'm with SEIU Local 1, and at Local 1, our climate justice and our environmental justice work is really rooted in supporting the work of frontline environmental justice organizations through building these union and community partnerships. And so, when we think of environmental justice, we look to the definition that's put forth by Detroiters working for environmental justice, that environmental justice is based on the reality that certain groups in society bear unequal environmental and economic burdens like poor air or poor water quality, as well as unhealthy living conditions resulting from industrial, municipal, and commercial operations, or even, federal, state, local laws, regulations, and policies. So, as Commissioner Davis mentioned, with these historically marginalized communities bearing the brunt of environmental injustice. And so for us as a union of mostly Black and Brown service sector workers, the majority of whom are women, we know it's these historically marginalized groups that are experiencing, the worst of climate change, have been for decades, while living in these communities that are experiencing the legacy of, redlining and industrial pollution and a lack of historical investment in infrastructure. And also for us, environmental justice is worker justice, because a person's lived experience in their community impacts the kind of worker that they are on the job, and vice versa. So catastrophic environmental and infrastructure issues like flooding can have devastating impacts on workers' families and even how they get to and from work, or how they continue to provide for their families. At Local 1, we do represent some of the workers at the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, whose daily work helps divert water away from people's homes and helps maintain the sewers and monitors for leaks, pollutants, and other damage. So, you can imagine they're out in the field on the front lines of mitigating flooding impacts for thousands of families across Chicagoland, while themselves experiencing those impacts in their own homes and communities when they're off the job. So, addressing flooding, like addressing other environmental justice issues that impact our members, means bridging the equity gap for these historically marginalized communities and investing in climate resilient infrastructure. So we're really grateful to be included in this conversation about real environmental issues that affect workers' lives. And yeah, I'm excited to bring some of these learnings to our members as well.
Ryan?
Sure. Thanks, Commissioner. Like Yiran, thank you for your leadership here for hosting this event, to you and Commissioner Brown for your leadership on the Stormwater Committee. And I also want to say, Yiran, your response is such a beautiful example of how environmental justice ties to community and jobs. And I could not give a better kind of example of definition. So thank you for kind of setting context here. But maybe I should probably provide a little context on my answer. So the Metropolitan Planning Council is an independent planning and policy organization. We work on critical built environment issues like housing, transportation, sustainability, and water, including drinking water and flooding or stormwater. And we do it all through an equity lens. Our goal is a greater Chicago region where every community thrives. And in the context of today's conversation, our ideal built environment is one that has quality and affordable housing, protection from flooding, resilience to a changing climate, and healthy and accessible rivers. All topics where the critical services that MWRD and all the workers of MWRD deliver each and every day. This is essential work. We saw that during COVID. It's not shut down. We need the service for our region to thrive. In terms of having a definition for, or kind of a public statement about environmental justice, we generally don't try to define the work. It's I think very well described, but as the example of Detroit, or by our local community leaders who refer to, just if folks are interested in reading more, the environmental justice platform, first adopted by the first people of color Environmental Leadership Summit, which has been decades now out in the world. That said, the harms and injustices that underpin the need for such a term are well documented, and they're at the core of NPC's research and our work to build equity in the built environment. In the context of flooding in Chicago and Cook County and really in Illinois and across the nation, there's a clear story. The damages from urban flooding are frequently borne by communities least resilient to disruption. And there are indisputable research-based inequities documented that tie race and income to how flooding impacts our region and the vibrancy and thriving capacity of our region. So addressing flooding is one of the most essential things that we can do as a region to address equity and resilience long into the future.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. Bryan.
Well, that was a lot. So a little to see how I can follow it up. So at Elevate Nonprofit, we do include flooding and environmental justice all into, who we are. And our main thing is to include all that in the programs that we design and implement. And when we go into homes, so we're looking at all of that. How does flooding tie into the health of the home, tie into the health of the occupant? I tend to use the word occupant because you never know. It could be a homeowner, it could be a renter, your family member just staying there. So we work very hard when we're designing programs during the construction season, year in, year out, to incorporate all of the things that we are going to be talking about here and all the things that everybody that Ryan and Yiran said. So that's like the core, one of the core things, and why I'm at Elevate is because we get to think about all that wide scope and bring it into the work that we do. Whether it's a lot of our work is lot by lot, so we get to see the impact of that. And so I work on multiple lead removal programs, and one of our biggest programs is the Healthy Homes programs, where we include stormwater management, proper ventilation for homes, and how we can make, how we can connect the resources, because equity and justice sometimes is, can you afford justice? Can you afford to, to get to level the playing field? So that's a big part of who we are, is being able to do that at the lot level.
That's great. Thanks so much for that, Bryan, Yiran, and Ryan. I think it's a great way to help kick off this dialogue. And Ryan, I really liked what you said too. And Bryan and Yiran, the district works hard every single day to protect homes and communities from flooding. The way I tend to look at this issue is on a continuum. It's not like, is flooding going to happen or is it not going to happen in the two extremes? It is always going to be a matter of how is flooding going to occur and how do we need to keep adjusting so that we can make sure that we're making Cook County as resilient as possible, and we're also supporting the communities that need it the most. Because when all of our communities are supported, the whole county thrives. So I also want to tip my hat to the staff of the district and acknowledge the phenomenal work that they do and keep doing every single day. I know we have at least one question that's come in, and I'm going to try to get to that in a second. I want to keep encouraging you to chat your questions if you have them for our panelists. The next question we've got for you is, what successful stormwater management tactics have you experienced? Have you seen, felt, worked on yourself? And what are the metrics that you've used to define success? I don't mean to get overly technical with that, but I think part of thinking about success is understanding what we're trying to achieve. How do you know, in the tactics that you've experienced, the successful tactics, how do you sense that they are successful, especially given that continuum that we're on experiencing climate change. And with that, let's start with Bryan first, since you wrapped up the last one.
All right. So let me. So tactics, right? The thing is, I wrote some things down, and the way you answered it, or the way you gave the question. So I'm trying to. What's successful stormwater management tactics, and what does it mean for those tactics to be successful, and what are the metrics? So everybody has, from what I'm seeing here, everybody's working at different levels. I work at the home level. I'm a construction analyst, and I go into the home and I assess the home. I speak with the homeowners, and I'm, processing the home, seeing how flooding happens at the home. So for me, the first thing is education with the occupant or the owner, speaking to them and educating them on like how flooding can be happening at the home, and then identifying it, and then some of the tactics after that. In the way I look at it, because preventing flooding in a home has a cost to it. So I'm always looking at first identifying how the flooding happening, what is the source, whether it's the stormwater that's landing on the roof, the gutters, the downspouts, whether it's sewer backup, whether it's ponding or overland flooding. And then I want to educate the homeowner on what's going on, how the water is behaving at their home. And then because I'm always limited in the budget and the cost and what I can do at each home per program, I'm looking at what would make the biggest impact on the home. So I'll use a small example. A lot of homes, we started disconnecting downspouts to reduce some of the water that was going into the sewer system. Many homes weren't designed to have that type of water being discharged around the home. So usually the simplest thing, and I guess I would say the biggest bang for the buck in the tactic, is putting in new locations for the downspouts, so where they can get to a more greener area. I bought this house that I'm in about 2 years ago, and I had a downspout that was discharging onto my concrete patio and near the walkway. I had it redone, and I told the contractor, I don't want a downspout here. I want to do about 50% of water into my backyard, about 25% into the two discharging points in the front yard. So for the cost and for the amount of water that I get away from the foundation, so I don't have seepage in the home, that has been one of my first go-to tactics, is relocating and then incorporating, and this is what I learned in Rain Ready, and I'm pretty sure Ryan knows a lot about it, is incorporating some type of green infrastructure to manage that stormwater. To give a little example of what I've learned, usually in a 1-inch rain event, a 1,000 to 1,200 square foot roof can see about 500 to 700 gallons of water. So where is that water going to go? Where are we placing that water? Where is the homeowner going to manage that runoff? So that is, in that aspect, in that example, that is one of the tactics that I'm using. Like, where can we put this water so that is managed, so that it is absorbed? I have a tree on one side, so that's where 50% of the stormwater runoff at my home goes to, because I've experienced seepage, I've experienced sewer backup, and I've had to implement different techniques, different tactics to stop the flooding. But usually, again, my biggest thing is, how can I, reduce the flooding and be more impactful at the lowest amount of cost? Because again, we invest a lot of money into our homes, and not everybody has $20,000-$30,000 laying around to put an interior drain tile system, or $5,000-$6,000 to put a backwater valve in. And depending on the system that you set up, the cost can go up. So again, with the homeowners, I'm always trying to educate, A, on their behavior with how they use water at home, and B, what is the most cost effective and biggest impact that we can do with a fix.
That's great. Thank you very much for that, Bryan. Yiran? and you know, don't feel compelled, just jump in. In fact, I think after this round, I'm just going to let everybody jump in as they want. And I do want to get to a couple of questions that we have in the chat. And I can go to Ryan as well.
I'm happy to jump in if that's
Great.
helpful. Yeah, I think Bryan provided a pretty healthy perspective on these kind of tactical site level things that you can do at your home, kind of on your block, to solve flooding once it's starting to happen. And I think in my experience working in the Chicago region and really across the nation with many of the leading folks working on stormwater and urban flooding, private side, public side, communities, successful tactics in my mind are kind of delivered because, like, in the context of two types of vision setting. And so kind of the background is for that is like a tactic alone, as Bryan knows and has seen, doesn't always work unless it's happening at scale across the block, across the community. Sometimes it can't happen at all unless there's bigger investments made, like the ones that MWRD are making. But those are delivered in kind of two ways, in my opinion. One is kind of in the context of a big, ambitious vision. The city of Philadelphia has one such vision they started in about 24 years ago. And the other is in more of a practical, achievable series of plans. And I think our neighbors to the north in Milwaukee have been really have demonstrated very powerfully how to tie together many different programs that are practical and achievable, kind of at the site, community, and regional scale. And all of this is in the context, and I have a policy wonk, so forgive me, but all of this is in the context of kind of essential parts of like a strong governance structure. Comprehensive, coordinated investments in planning and capital improvements, establishment of incentives and proper regulations. The district does both of those, and robust operations and maintenance. The district does this of the system, and these are necessary for any one of those tactics to really be successful in the context of a regional problem, which is flooding and massive storm events. And often this requires coordination across governments, different agencies and departments, collaboration with non-governmental entities, including, and especially now, community organizations, leaders, individuals, civic organizations, and businesses. And I think in particular, the use of green solutions is something that we can demonstrably say are effective, that there is a large body of research that has moved these practices, these green solutions, from the fringe a couple decades ago to the center of many regions' tools for combating climate-driven changes in rainfall. You asked about the metrics, and this is such an interesting one because I think historically the metrics have been avoided costs. Structures of that aren't being impacted anymore because of an investment. And I think it's a hard story to tell when something doesn't happen. We know how hard it is to be flooded, or to be sick, or to lose a job, but we don't know that the experience of when these things don't happen. You haven't lived it. And I think the same problem is part of the story in stormwater investments. And one of the things that myself and many of my colleagues in the region and across the US have been trying to do is to quantify the other benefits that investing in green solutions can bring. And I think some of those that we have a pretty good research base for now, and we start to point to, are the avoided costs of investments in gray or other underground infrastructure that's essential and we can't do without, but knowing that there are complementary solutions at the surface. Energy savings, air quality improvements, carbon reduction, a big one as we talk about climate change. The increase in property values is a big opportunity for many of our communities. Increased recreational opportunities, access by children under 6 and adults, Urban heat island reduction, another climate risk that is one of the two major climate risks that the city of Chicago or the region of Chicago experiences: urban flooding and heat risk. Improved habitat and nature, access to nature. And then one that I think probably resonates really closely with SEIU Local 1 is job creation. And the use of green infrastructure and green solutions has a wide range of jobs across every stage of a person's work life. So there's a lot of opportunities to grow in these sectors, and many of these jobs are going to be more resilient to the change in digitization and changes in workforce that coming investments in AI and other digital tools are bringing.
I love it. That's great. And I'm gonna turn to one of the questions that we have in the chat right now about what can we do with in the spirit of water hygiene and sanitation. WASH is the acronym, continuity during emergency times, and tip my hat to SEIU on something too. Because I think they're connected. It's about what can we do when we are in a flood situation, when we're going through a period of heavy rains, but it's also about what we can do before we even get to that point. And one of the things that I've been impressed by is that SEIU has advocated for non-toxic cleaners that are used by their janitorial staff at MWRD. In other words, and I'm just using that as an example, think of the same example in your home. If you are transitioning to, let's say, green alternatives in terms of cleaners, if you're moving away from PFAS-based cookware, for example, that's all material that doesn't wind up in the water stream, the wastewater stream, and then ultimately out into the world when we do have storms. So thinking about how best to work on these issues in the home before we're ever in a flood situation or a heavy precipitation situation is really when to start. The question has to do, though, with emergency times. What can we do? I think we heard from Bryan earlier about blockers. I know, for example, that both the Friends of the Chicago River and MWRD have overflow action notifications that you can sign up for. So when we anticipate getting heavy rains that our system can't accommodate fully in the region, you can get notified that if you can put off doing the wash or put off doing the dishes in the dishwasher for another day until we can get through the storm, it'll help greatly. So I urge you to sign up for those notifications. We'll try to get those links into the chat here while we're talking. But those are a couple of ideas on how to help during emergency times, and also how to think before emergencies as well. We have another question that's come in about, are there any implementation or conversations being held at both the home level and at the larger community-based level about green infrastructure, green spaces? And the answer to that is yes, we are. The district has, for example, a program called the Space to Grow program in the city, where we will do a cost share of about 1/3 to help bring green infrastructure to schoolyards. One of our challenges right now is we don't have a similar program in the 120 plus communities, the suburbs around Chicago. And we need to have that. Part of it's been in large part, it's been a financing problem. We have funding in the city through the Department of Water Management and Chicago school system. When it comes to the 120 plus other suburbs, it's a patchwork of agencies that sometimes do and sometimes don't have funding. So we don't have the kind of cohesive program that we do in the city, just by virtue of the fact that we have 120 plus communities as suburbs. We're working on that. We're having conversations with funders. We're also looking to federal and state funding sources to help with that. But I think we probably all intuit on this video conference that the more we can help bring green infrastructure to our suburbs, the more it helps the city. And the more it helps Lake Michigan, the more it helps the Chicago River. And that's something that our team and Commissioner Brown's team are working on. Great question. I very much appreciate it. Let's go to the next question that we have and keep the items coming in the chat. And Brendan, thank you for posting the overflow action notification link in the chat there. What is flood insurance, and is that covered with basic home, business, or renters insurance policies? Are there public programs that people can participate in? If not, I'll open it up to everybody.
I'll jump in and try to give some kind of level setting here. So there's two kind of primary types of insurance that people get to address flooding. And unfortunately, the short answer for both of these is it's pretty imperfect, and it's increasingly costly. The first one that most homeowners would experience is typically a rider on your homeowner's insurance policy, and it's usually something like a basement backup policy. Different companies have different terms for it, but it's typically referred to as a basement backup policy. Those tend to be capped at $10,000 per incident, which I think Bryan could probably tell you is often not enough if you have a sewage in your basement. And that's for water coming in that's related to a flood event, a rain event. The second type is run through the federal government, through the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and offered through insurance companies. And it is a federal flood insurance. It is more associated with riverine or flooding in areas connected to rivers. And then I guess this is an insurance thing, but I should just add, often after federal disasters, like we've had two in Illinois in the last year related to flooding or rain events, there becomes money delivered down through the state to that people can apply for. And I think we've seen a lot of that this year.
Great. Feel free to jump in, Yiran or Bryan, if you have anything. Bryan, I see you just took yourself off mute.
No, I was going to basically confirm what Ryan said, because we actually how I got started is my family bought a building on like Pulaski and Irving Park area, and in 2015 in the summertime we got about a foot of water from sewer backup. And we were really fortunate because we were very ignorant to, you get, the insurance and you get the, and you're just like, okay, but we were real fortunate that we did have the sewer backup rider. And I just kind of wanted to confirm what Ryan said, like it was a 3-unit. So it destroyed the washer, the dryer, 3 furnaces, 3 water heaters, and the actual cost, because the unit on the basement level was about $65,000, and that's in 2015. You got to remember, now after the pandemic, the cost of construction is 3 times more. I mean, in my readings and trying to always learn, I've found that Chicago has one of, if not the highest cost of construction in the nation. Different things, but because we're in the middle, importation of materials and finding good tradesmen is difficult. So our construction costs are higher. So, and then what I found also is in how you speak to the insurance company. You can't just say, I want flood insurance, because they'll tell you like, well, you don't live in a floodplain, so you don't need flood insurance. And you have to tell them, like, I want, like what Ryan said, a sewer backup rider, and you can, how much you can afford to pay will dictate, the amount of protection you have. 10,000 will barely get you drywall and framing, cleaned out in today's, construction industry. So I just wanted to share that, like, that's kind of right where I got into Center for Neighborhood Technologies and into the Rain Ready program was right after that. But yes, the cost of flooding and the damage and the emotional toll, because I didn't know, I was still ignorant. We bought a building so that I could live with my family, my mom could live, and another relative. And, my mom was crying. She was, panicking, and I was in there throwing water out of the basement, trying to save the home. So that's another part of education that I think is important when you're talking to homeowners. When we partner with like the Bungalow Society of Chicago, like to get that out to people so that people know that they can protect themselves from, sewer backup, or at least have, some way of financial, I don't know if it's relief, but some financial support when going through that, because it is pretty devastating. I've been in homes where people completely abandon their basement. They don't even go down there because the flooding happens every time there's a strong rain event. They're just like, well, I just don't go down there. And they don't understand that leaving that is so bad, because, water is great. We drink it, you got to get your 72 ounces in every day, but unmanaged water at the home will create, mold and spores. And that really ties into the health of the owners. And, again, people don't understand that. They don't see it, that there's mold near their furnace. So their furnace is sucking in the spores and pumping it through the whole house. And they don't know why their 6-year-old has cough for, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and they can't figure it out. So I just wanted to say that because I did experience all that. And even in this home, I experienced seepage because of the downspouts and, put an interior drain tile and move things. So just kind of little tangent there, but just wanted to share that, like, I've been through that, and exactly what Ryan was saying is you have to know. And so I'll always go back to, sharing and educating, the public, the people in the community, so that they know that there is things that they can do to help them.
That's great.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to what Bryan said about like there being such a huge like kind of knowledge gap, or like an educational gap that needs to be filled, and also what Ryan said earlier about preventing flooding in the home has a big cost to it. There's often a resource gap associated with it. I'm not like a stormwater management expert, but we talk to workers every day, and so one of our member leaders, also a vice president at Local 1, longtime janitor. She spends $6,000 a year on her flooding insurance. And, for a janitor in Chicago making, you could go up to $20 an hour. That still means you have to work 300 hours a year, or 38 days. Think about like it's a month plus an extra week just for flooding insurance, because flooding is just so prevalent and so like devastating. In addition to, these daily unignorable costs of housing, food, healthcare, childcare, all of that. And so, yeah, we see the need to respond to flooding and other disasters as increasing wealth inequality. And it really does become kind of these infrastructure questions as well. And yeah, we're always ready to throw down for these large, big policy wins CEJA or a Green New Deal for Illinois, but our members are also very responsive to these individual fixes that some people on this call have mentioned. So I know things like the rain barrel program, for example, through MWRD, we've gotten a lot of positive response there, because people are always thinking, what are these small actions I can take, both to protect my family and also to contribute to the good of our wider Chicagoland community. So yeah, I just wanted to also just put some appreciation out for Ryan and Bryan for your expertise on this.
Yiran, thanks so much for mentioning that. And I know that you also mentioned the education program that you have on, to try to move away from toxic cleaners in here. But the point that that I don't want to get lost that you just made is when you are buying flood insurance, you're buying insurance to help recoup costs for damage that has already occurred. By nature, It's a reactive effort, and it's important, but we have to keep working on the preventative side to reduce flooding in the first place, so that that worker doesn't have to spend the equivalent of a month just to afford to be able to react to the situation. I would not have made that point if it hadn't been for you, Yiran. So I really appreciate that. I know we're winding down here and don't have a whole lot of time left for another full-blown question and discussion item. But I do want to mention Oak Park, the rain barrel program that you just mentioned, Yiran. I know that Brendan put the rain barrel link into the chat. I have 3 of them around my house. I use them to be able to water fruit that I grow. I collect water that runs off of our roof and use it to water our strawberries, our tomatoes, things like that. You can save money that way. We do have a chat question, and I don't want to leave without trying to get to it. But it was a question about the Rain Ready program for Oak Park in 2024. When will the application be open? I'm not sure we're going to be able to answer that here. I can see if anybody knows the answer, but we can try to get a link in if anybody does know, or circle back to you after the VidCon is done. Anybody on Rain Ready and Oak Park and the application process?
I'm not sure the status. Sorry.
That's fine. And Dawn, thank you, Ryan, for trying. Dawn just plugged the link into the chat for anybody who wants to know. I'm a big believer in closing up before you absolutely need to, because we all have busy lives. I really, really want to thank Yiran and Bryan and Ryan for your expertise, and not just the thinking that you've brought to the discussion to make it informative today, but all of the incredible advocacy that you do in your lives, both professionally and otherwise, to help educate people about flooding, how they can defend themselves against it, and how we can be in this together as a county to keep making sure that we're holding up the communities that need it the most, and to keep doing better every day. That's what it's all about. The last thing I'm going to do is invite you to visit the MWRD website, mwrd.org, for resources there. And please be in touch with my office if you have any follow-up questions. You can reach me at Davis C. That's DAVISC at MWRD. And if you want to connect with one of our speakers, we can connect you with them. If you have questions about how we can be of assistance, we'll do that as well. And so with that, I'm going to close and thank all of you for being on today. I know you've got a million other things you probably could be doing, but the fact that you're showing up to educate yourselves is a really good sign. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Trying to answer that little question there.
Yeah. It was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Thank you for the invite and the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. If we have any questions, we'll got your info. So
yeah. Please feel free to reach out. I can be long-winded, but I always feel like it's good to share as much information, as much knowledge. I consider myself a student of this, and I just want to pass on as much as possible so that homeowners, contractors, other agencies, and other companies can see we should move with purpose, not just move for profit or just move to work. There's a purpose with it, and you can even make a profit moving for the people and helping out. So If anything, feel free to reach out. Any other questions? Definitely, you can share my information with my email. I'd love to answer any questions.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Thank you,
Appreciate
man.
it.
Appreciate it.
Have a nice day. See you.
You too.